Welcome to Diabetes Day by Day, the American Diabetes Association's official podcast. For today's episode, we're discussing a common challenge, and that is the experience of decision fatigue. Living with diabetes means making countless decisions every single day: what to eat, when to check blood sugar, how to adjust medications, and lots more. Over time, that constant stream of choices can lead to what has been termed decision fatigue, which describes a mental exhaustion that makes it harder to stay engaged in self-care and makes it, frankly, harder to do a lot of the things that we set as goals for ourselves. In this episode, we'll explore what decision fatigue looks like for people living with diabetes, what it is, how it impacts daily life and health, as well as, importantly, strategies that can help ease that mental load. I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, professor of family and community medicine in the Sidney Kimmel Medical College of Thomas Jefferson University. And joining me today, as always, is my co-host.
I'm excited for this episode, Neil. I'm Dr. Sara Wettergreen. I'm an associate professor at the University of Colorado Skaggs School of Pharmacy and an ambulatory care clinical pharmacist.
Sara, we have two fantastic guests joining us today to share insights on this important topic. The first is Casey Coffman, who lives with type 1 diabetes and who is a mechanical engineer. He is also a volunteer at the American Diabetes Association, has helped out with so many things over the years, and he's here to share his personal insights into experiencing decision fatigue and also some thoughts about how to deal with it, how to overcome it. Casey, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on. Great topic to talk about. Love it.
And also joining us is Aaron Sutton. Aaron Sutton is a licensed social worker and the director of the Sutton Institute for Psychotherapy. Welcome, Aaron.
Dr. Skolnik, it's always a pleasure. Dr. Wettergreen, good to see you. And Casey, nice to meet you as well.
Aaron, can I ask you from the point of view of a psychological perspective, how do we define decision fatigue? And do you have any hints about how to notice when it is creeping up on us?
So each of us, Neil, when we make a decision, whether it's a big or small decision, draws from our same pool of cognitive resources, right? So all those resources that we have. And for you and I, for Sara, what we're going to wear, what we're going to eat may not be that big of a decision that we make. But over time, that fatigue, and that's what you're describing, that decision fatigue, is when our mental energy wears down. Real consequences can happen. Health consequences. All of us have decision fatigue. In psychotherapy, we see this as a form of what we call self-regulation depletion. So the brain really just gets tired of being on duty all the time, and we become fatigued by that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love the way that you framed it, that we all have that. And that's really important for our listeners who have diabetes to understand. And I think also helpful for family members to understand. Decision fatigue is something that we all deal with. But the difference here is that the number of decisions that you have to make on any given day and the consequences of those decisions every single day, Aaron, you put it so well, are so large that one is at greater risk of that having decision fatigue. Is that right?
That's right. I think it puts you at an increased risk of having more fatigue because of the complexity of the decisions that you're making and what the potential outcome could be.
Let's start learning a bit more about living with the experience of having decision fatigue. Casey, can you share with us some of your experience in making diabetes decisions day by day and how you tell whether that decision fatigue is creeping up on you?
Yeah, great question. I think I'll answer it in two parts. And the first one is really categorizing what it is and what it feels like. I think you nailed it right on the head with mental exhaustion, right? It is a state of you've reached a point of stress in which you can no longer comfortably handle. And that for me has felt like it leads directly into a depression, where you can no longer handle your basic care needs or other priorities outside of diabetes. I do have strategies. We'll talk about those hopefully later, but how I really feel when I can feel this coming on, right? I evaluate where my mental state is at. Some examples, I guess, when it's getting there, when it's getting close, it would be if I'm having trouble making a decision. For example, my wife asked me to make plans for a concert or something, and I'm having trouble making that decision or doing that task. Okay, now I feel like I'm a little close to being stressed out or to the point where I'm too many decisions today. It's getting really bad if I am having trouble making a decision on which shelf do I put a plate on to go in a dishwasher, right? Like a very basic task is now becoming a little bit too burdensome. And then when you get struck with decisions that should be just autonomous, I feel like I've reached a point and I need to somehow reset and get back. I don't know if I use this word correctly, but I love the word homeostasis to get back to a point of normalcy and reset. And I usually try and gauge where I'm at. My wife helps me with that too. She's very good at calling it out.
Now, Casey, you're describing, it sounds like one end of decision fatigue when it gets to a point where it's really pretty severe. Do you
Mhm.
notice that also? And again, we all have good and bad days. On a good day, we go through things in a pretty fluid way. But are there days where it's just you get there, but it's slogging through mud? Is that also part of that experience of decision fatigue that occurs perhaps even more often than that really severe amount that you're describing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not easy to live with diabetes, but if you, and something that I practice is gratefulness, right? Which makes it easier. Hey, I'm grateful that I can just live with the disease alone. So it does make it easier to make those decisions first thing in the morning. What am I going to eat? How am I going to bolus? Am I going to exercise today? And if I package those up in little routines, they become much easier, but they're still more difficult than a normal person's life.
Yeah, and let me come back to some of those strategies that you were just
Sure.
describing in a little bit. Sarah,
You're reminding me of a concept that I've heard of before, and I wonder if it's one you've heard of, Aaron, from your experience, but called spoon theory. So, in this concept of spoon theory, you think about everyone starts the day with a certain number of spoons, and spoons can be thought of as energy resources. So, if you're thinking of someone who maybe doesn't have as many illnesses or pain, or they don't live with disability, they might start off with more spoons and they might be able to get through all their tasks through a day without running out of spoons. Or if it's a particularly challenging day, maybe they run lower and their energy's lower. But this metaphor is used to think about the experience of someone living with a chronic condition like diabetes, or someone who's living with a disability or chronic pain. Can be applied to many conditions, but it sounds like something that could apply here where maybe on certain days you're just starting off with fewer spoons and you have more decisions to make. You're taking the time to think a little bit more in detail about what you're eating, how that affects your medication, when you're going to exercise. Do I need to take some additional carbs or lower my bolus dose so that I can exercise after this meal? There's just so many more decisions. And I think when I think about that application of spoon theory, I imagine you'd run out of spoons a lot sooner. And so trying to keep that load full so that you don't run out by the end of the day and get to that point of decision fatigue seems like a concept that would apply. Aaron, is that something you've heard of?
Absolutely, spoon theory. And you're right. And I think most of us, when we're making decisions all day long, don't have much of an impact. But when you're discussing the spoon theory, is that some spoons are much bigger than others, and that this is going to really be impactful today. And it sounds like that's what Casey was talking about, where that fatigue comes in after making those decisions day in, day out, every day.
So, turning to you, Casey, and thinking about the things we described, I see you shaking your head. It sounds like things are resonating.
Sure.
How does it feel day to day when you're in that midst of decision fatigue? Are you feeling differences in your energy? Do you see differences in your glucose management?
Yeah, and I love that spoon theory. I haven't heard of that before, but totally makes sense. I may have used a different analogy for it or a different metaphor previously. But when you're in it, And I use that word depression, and it does feel like a depression. So when I hit a limit or when I'm getting close to the limit, I feel less motivated to handle daily, common, very easy or simple tasks that require a smaller spoon. And I really have to just focus on the big spoons. So it feels like my smaller spoons, sticking with this metaphor, just they vanish, they go away, they deplete. And I just have to focus on the really primary critical ones because that's all the energy I have left.
That's definitely how this applies too. It's one of the descriptors I've seen for it says you get to the end of the day, you have 3 spoons left, and you've got to pack up for your bag for the next day. You're planning ahead if you can. You need to brush your teeth, get ready for bed, all those things that you're going to run out. So trying to offload some of those tasks that will just have to wait to another time. But as someone like you who seems like a high achiever, I'm sure it's hard to put some of those things to the side. So thinking about those scenarios and how you've managed these different challenging times, what are some strategies you used, either big strategies or small adjustments day to day, that have helped you to reduce decision fatigue?
I would say the most impactful thing I've changed since I was diagnosed just about 5 years ago is daily walking. It sounds very simple, but it helps you practice exercise, which if I was to teach anyone with diabetes how to manage it a little bit better, is exercise is a miracle drug. And it also lets you practice mindfulness. So in some ways, it's a meditation method, right? So a combination of daily walking and a combination of meditation are pretty low energy required methods to stabilize my mood and my energy levels.
So, Casey, can I ask you, many people believe that, aspire to exercise, and then don't really end up carrying that out. Any hints about how you've been able to make that priority and achieve that?
Yeah, I think if everyone knew how to transition from motivation into discipline, right? Understanding first that it takes motivation and then you have to transfer all of that into discipline to be able to do it while you're not motivated.
Yeah.
Find a routine. Routine makes it easier. And I know for a fact, diabetics, we stick to routines, I think, a little easier than normal folks, right? Because we can see the results real time, like on your app or on your CGM, but that translates into things outside of your blood glucose levels, right? Your mood, your energy levels. So finding a routine, not starting too aggressively, especially if you are not athletic or haven't exercised before. And really anything is more than nothing, right? So I talked to a lot of type 2 diabetics in my family personally, and they ask me, hey, what's your secret? Or what should I do? Go on a walk. I believe that's a form of exercise that I think most folks can do reliably and consistently.
Yeah, and I love the idea of routine, and that comes natural for some of us, not so natural for others. When we all have different rhythms to our day, a natural rhythm, and some of us are morning people, some of us are middle of the day or evening people. And to know yourself, I think it was on top of the Acropolis, the Temple of Apollo in Greek times, one of these statements was know thyself. And that remains so important. If you're a morning person, structure those important things in the morning. Wake up a little bit earlier. That's when you exercise every day. On the other hand, some of us hate mornings, barely get out of bed. Not a bad idea then to put that priority that you said is that you've rated as number one after dinner, perhaps. Aaron, any thoughts you have on that?
President Obama was famous for wearing a dark blue suit with a white shirt, and he wore it every day. And when asked why he did that, he said he makes too many decisions in a day. The last thing he needs to worry about is what he's going to wear. And so I say that often I think as Casey was talking, structure really reduces stress. when we know what to expect, it makes things a whole lot easier. And the other thing I heard Casey talking about, I think with walking and exercise, is that concept of mindfulness. And I think Casey was saying that. And to me, no better activity for mindfulness exists than walking, because we get to feel the wind, we get to smell the outdoors, we get to be with ourselves. And when we are really mentally overloaded, that's exactly what we have to do. We have to take a pause. And so we're doing it by being outside, and we're doing it by exercising. I think what Casey was also referring to a while ago is social support, which is another huge one, that when we have others involved of, hey, how do you manage exercise? What are your routines? What do you do? What works well for you? And trying to make that plan is the best way that we make our informed decisions, right? We listen to others and we make our own decision about what we're going to do. The other thing I think when it comes to decision fatigue is trying to automate things that we can when possible. And I talk a lot to people, especially now with CGMs, right? That we can monitor that and we can make things automated, because again, what we're trying to do is have our pool of cognitive resources remain big. So when it's time to make decisions we want to make, where we'll go to dinner, what show we're going to watch, we can actually have more energy for that and not be depleted.
Those are such great examples. And when you talk through those, I'm curious, Casey, if anything resonates with you as something you've tried, or maybe something you want to try now, that to simplify your diabetes care, you've streamlined or made into a routine.
So I've implemented quite a few routines, and Neil was mentioning, if you're not a morning person, I am not a morning person, right? And I think if my wife was listening to this, she would laugh. But 2 months ago, I tried to, okay, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. every day. I'm going to have breakfast and I'm going to try and regulate my appetite for the day. And then I'm going to exercise. It didn't go well. It didn't go well at all. So I've actually tried that twice, and I've not given up. I think I've just understood that for me, it takes less energy and it's easier. And Aaron was saying that cognitive pool of energy, it takes less of my overall pool of energy if I do that routine in the afternoon. So I somehow fit that in. And that makes the whole day, I know what to expect. I love how Aaron said that. I know what to expect. I don't have to overly think about what is my next move in the next hour going to be. That's already been planned. So being very organized, I think, is something that I definitely wanted to talk about, as well as exercise and proper nutrition. Is organizing yourself and organizing your time is actually very important, especially with people who are trying to achieve a lot outside of just managing their health and diabetes. They have a job, maybe they have another business, there's other relationships they have to take care of. When you get 4 or 5 or 6 big things that you have to structure around, you need to stay organized, or else you're just going to spend too much energy just even scheduling, right?
Can you talk a little bit about nutrition? So you mentioned nutrition, and obviously something critical and something that can be pretty hard to figure out all the pieces. Any experience there that might be helpful?
And I'm not a nutritionist, but I have found a lot. I'm an engineer, I'm an analyst, right? I love data. I love watching how my body performs after I eat certain things or I do certain exercises. So I've taken a lot of notes. And one of the big things that has changed for me, as far as like blood glucose spiking, right? And then crashing and getting that energy drop, eat proteins first. It might seem weird sometimes, like if you're eating a hamburger, sometimes I don't eat the bread first. That's a huge one. Exercising after you eat, which helps you process. I know that's not nutrition, but it's just it can really help you throughout the day. And a little bit of fiber, but not too much for me. That's how my body operates. If I have too much fiber, I know it doesn't process the same as normal
Eh,
carbohydrates.
And as I'm listening, what I'm hearing that I think is important, you've said a couple of times for you, and we have general nutrition recommendations, and we know that, and we encourage people to talk with their certified diabetes education specialist, with the dietitian, but then we also we're not all the same. And meshing those general guidances with what in your CGM and over time having back to that idea of routine, a routine that helps take away the need to decide at each moment, what do I do next? Speaking of what comes next, coming up not that long from now is Thanksgiving and then the Christmas holidays, which tend to be challenging times for many people. Aaron, I know we've had you join us for episodes talking about this before. Any thoughts that you have as because that increases the potential for decision fatigue? There's family we're attending to, there's new foods. Any thoughts going into that season?
I do have a couple of thoughts, Neil. I've said this before, and I think it's very pertinent this time of year with planning ahead for success. I say that because we all know that we're going to go over to our favorite aunt's house and have her favorite dessert, and that's okay. Because I think we have to have a gentle intention for what we're going to do and not a rigid rule, right? Is that I am going to have that, but I'm probably not going to have as much food before I go over there or while I'm there. But we want to enjoy that, right? We got to have some type of flexibility to enjoy the things that we do enjoy. So, what does that structure look like? And then some emotional awareness, right? This is a very stressful time of year for a lot of us. And so we have to recognize that with that stress, again, as we take away from our pool of cognitive resources, that stress is there and it's going to create decision fatigue faster. We're going to feel that. And so we're going to cope with that by engaging in something that is probably not the best for us, such as overeating or overindulging. It's really a lot about how we prepare going into it. I also, on that note, wanted to ask Casey a question about he wanted to set up a exercise plan. He was going to get up at 5 a.m. and it didn't work out. And I'm really curious to hear, Casey, how you would approach the holidays, especially if somebody says, hey, these are my best intentions and it doesn't work out, right? What kind of self-compassion do we have? Because I think, again, we're our own worst critic. And so when we're feeling that way, we're probably going to feel hopeless. And if we're feeling hopeless, then we're not going to make our best decisions. What is it like for you when that didn't work out and you had to pivot? And what advice would you give for people, especially at this time of year?
The answer is in the name of this podcast, day by day. So two things, Aaron, you said it perfectly. You need to prepare for flexibility. Rigid rules are really going to hurt you. I don't think those are something you should put in place, especially before holidays when there's multiple factors at play. And if you quote unquote fail, right? So let's say I have too much pumpkin pie, I have too many desserts, I overeat, and I lose control of my blood glucose. And I go to sleep, it's very high. I have to wake up the next day and somehow reset and not continue this going forward. Have a plan to reset. So do I need to take an hour out of my morning? If I hate using that word fail, right? Because you didn't fail. You planned and prepared for flexibility, right? I gave myself a little bit of cushion, but I need to be able to reset. And you do that day by day. So the morning, it's a new day. You made mistakes yesterday. How are you going to address them today? What are you going to do this morning? Do I hydrate? Do I go on a little walk? Do I bolus a little bit extra? Reset. Your emotions will start to come down. You won't feel as bad about yourself. That's how I did it the past 3 years. It's been awesome.
I love that. That is such an important concept because otherwise things just build up completely. And if there's one thing I hope our listeners remember from this discussion, it's that idea of day by day. We're almost out of time. Aaron, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I was just thinking decision fatigue does not mean that you're failing at diabetes care. That's what I just heard. It means you're human and that it's a sign of effort and not a sign of weakness. And we're all human. And I love, Casey, that was perfect when you said day by day. That's all any of us can do, right? Is that we're trying to make the best decisions we can today and that we try to move forward with them. I also love to encourage self-kindness. I think that any small compassionate adjustment we can make, it's going to do more for our long-term well-being than trying to make a major overhaul. And then lastly, I always like to close with hope. Even when the day feels heavy, remember that rest and routine and connection, all that can restore our decision-making energy. And that tomorrow we'll start again with a new set of spoons, and hopefully we'll make decisions that are better. So we'll have more spoons at the end of the day again for doing things that we find joy in or things that we love.
So important. Casey, your final thoughts.
Yeah, beautifully put. Final thoughts. Again, the theme of the day or the podcast is take it day by day. If I did have to give it what's worked for me, which may not work for someone else, practice minor exercise, organize yourself so you can follow better routines, make the decision making easier. Remind yourself, like Aaron was alluding to, speak kindly to yourself and practice mindfulness. You don't fail if you reach a point of decision fatigue. You start a new day and you do the best you can. You put in as much effort as you can.
So important. Sara, your thoughts?
I have nothing to add, but I'm just feeling so grateful to have these guests here who shared these great tips with us and optimistic. I think we know that the holiday season ahead can be a time of challenge for many people living with diabetes, but I feel optimistic and hopeful that the information provided today will be useful. What about you, Neil?
Sara, I agree. And I'm left with the thought, and Casey, thank you so much. One thing that we all often feel when we're struggling, and decision fatigue is part of it, is that we're alone. We're the only one that struggles with it. And your courage in talking about what you've experienced, and you are a young, strong, healthy person, that even for you, you're having these challenges, I think, one, makes us feel we're not alone, that other people that we admire and respect also struggle with this. Two, Aaron, I love the way that you put it, that fatigue is not a sign of failure, but it's a sign of effort. That when we work out hard, we feel fatigue at the end of it. We know that physically, and we sometimes don't acknowledge that mentally and emotionally. The same thing happens when we do our best. There's a certain amount of inevitable fatigue that comes along, and sometimes it can be really challenging and feel overwhelming, which is where I come back to Casey, and I'd like to end on the thought that you shared, that you take it day to day, that you wake up in the morning, that morning is a new day where we move forward, we acknowledge what we've been through, and then we move forward with our goals and with a fresh outlook. I want to thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Casey, for joining us. Sara, thank you as always. And as always, most of all, thanks go to our listeners. If you have any thoughts, our listeners, that you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a voicemail by calling 703-755-7288. That number is also in the show notes. We hope to hear from you. And for the American Diabetes Association, I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik. Thank you for joining us today.